So my name's Tim. I'm the current program manager for CCIQ's Ecobiz program. So CCIQ, State Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we look to support and advocate for small and medium-sized enterprises across a whole different array of services and offerings. One of the programs that we deliver is our Ecobiz program. And so that's what I'm here to chat to you today about. So what we want to cover in this presentation is, what is Ecobiz? What are the sort of applicable trends that we see within the program that we might be able to share with you guys? And then importantly, I guess, what are some really high level recommendations that we might be able to provide to you to help save through sustainability? So just to touch on really briefly what Ecobiz is. So Ecobiz has been around for about 20 years in one form or another. It's sat only with CCIQ though for about 8 years. So it's actually a government funded program. And what that means is that it's completely free for any groups to access and utilise. So while CCIQ delivers the program on behalf of the state government, your participation in it would be completely free at any stage. There's no hidden costs. There's no hidden ulterior motives. It's here to set up and support your businesses to become more sustainable, and importantly, to cut costs associated with your energy, water, and waste. So across that whole suite of initiatives. Over those 8 years that it's been at CCIQ, we've worked with well over 1,000 businesses across the state. So we've had a lot of really good success with those guys. For the businesses that stay engaged over a 12-month period, we're seeing about a 20% reduction across your energy, water, and waste costs. So for a lot of sporting clubs that might be spending, tens of thousands of dollars across those utilities, that can sort of amount to a large amount of money. So it's really fantastic to be able to see some of those results. What does that process work like? Well, we invite you to register online for the program, and I do have some QR codes and some business cards that I can hand out after this to help you guys register. In terms of sending us your bills, we do have a couple of pre-coaching requirements that we ask bills to set out. So that's just a short questionnaire, and we do get you to share some of your utility bills with us. It's purely so we can have some sort of benchmark for how much energy and water you're consuming, how much waste you're sending to landfill. It'll help our consultants once they're ultimately out on site with you guys. The real crux of the program and the real sort of value proposition from a business's perspective is this on-site coaching. So once you've registered and gone through with some of these pre-coaching requirements, we have one of our consultants, and I'll show you who they are later, but we have one of our consultants go out to your business. So they'll meet with you on site at your showgrounds, tennis clubs, rowing clubs, whatever that might be. They'll have 2 hours to then sort of walk around the site with you, have a chat about your business, have a chat about what your ambitions are and what your objectives are. If it's about reducing your environmental footprint, great. If it's you saying, look, I just spend a lot of money each year on my electricity, I really want someone to help me with that. Or we want to start getting more serious about our waste and helping sort of to divert materials from landfill, that's all fine. Those are all questions that our coaches will sort of work out with you on site. So that'll be over 2 hours. I'll quickly jump forward to this. Once that coach has been out with your business, they'll sort of step away and they'll have they'll prepare a report for you detailing some of the clear recommendations that they're making to your business. So in light of the information you've given them and in light of sort of your objectives and what you're trying to achieve, they'll produce you a tailored report outlining what your clear recommendations are. As a business, it's completely at your discretion. There's no obligation for you to implement all of the recommendations that are made in that report, but then you'll have about 12 months to go away and have a go at implementing some of those recommendations. And those recommendations will be anything from capital expenditure, so bits of equipment or infrastructure that you might be able to buy and install, ranging all the way through to simple behavioural changes and process improvements. So for a business like a facility like we're here at the moment, they might be looking at things like, I don't know who's down there or what schedule they might have, but why are all these lights on? Why is the scoreboard on if there's no one playing through to 8 o'clock tonight? Can we put that on a timer, or can we just have someone go through of a morning and make sure they're all shut down? So it's not to say all those recommendations are going to be paid requirements. Some of them can be really simple behavioural changes and process improvements. For businesses who are able to make a bit of a tangible reduction in their resource consumption, we've got the the opportunity to recognise them as one of our star partners. So businesses that can demonstrate a 10% reduction in their resource use can become some of our program star partners. Really valuable way for you to help sort of demonstrate that you guys are taking sustainability seriously, a way to get your communities involved and things like that. We've run through the coaching report previously, but again, that's just a tailored report that's going to come to your business after that on-site session. Waste assessments form a really integral part of our coaching sessions. So our coaches, whilst they're on site, they'll separate a little bit of that time or devote a little bit of that time to go through your waste bins, and they'll have a bit of a visual inspection of not only what recyclable materials are perhaps in your general waste that you might be able to pull out and help divert from landfill, but conversely, if you've got recycling bins available and you've got contamination in that bin that can't actually be recycled, they'll help highlight that for you, and they'll help sort of make some recommendations in conjunction with that inspection. Some of our regional experts, so these are the consultants that we're working with and who are actually out visiting businesses on a day-to-day basis. So for anyone here in the room, obviously you're stationed somewhere locally. We do have a large number of Brisbane and Southeast Queensland coaches, but we also have coaches sort of stretching all the way up to far north Queensland and sort of everywhere in between to help work with businesses all across the state. Some of the barriers when CCIQ does some surveying and some questionnaires to their member base about, well, what are the barriers for businesses in terms of implementing sustainable business practices? You hear a lot about it in the sort of general public and through media and everything like that. But what's actually preventing businesses from taking those steps? Principally in those surveys, what's coming back is a lack of time or expertise to devote to these sorts of projects, particularly if we're looking at sporting clubs and everything like that. You're often wearing a lot of different hats. You've got a lot going on within your business. You don't necessarily have a lot of time to set aside and say, all right, well, let me think about sustainability and what I can do there. Lack of money is a huge one. If you look at a really common recommendation that's getting made to businesses, it's looking at solar PV. Might be a really common opportunity. But of course, not every business or group's going to have $10,000 to $30,000 to set aside to solar installation. And then businesses that are operating out of a leased premises don't always have total agency over the way their business is structured and everything like that. So how does our program help sort of deal with some of those barriers that we're facing? Well, again, if you don't have time or expertise to devote to these special projects, you can access one of our consultants for 2 hours. It's not a lot of time, but it's enough opportunity for them to step through your organisation and point you in the right direction. Lack of money and operating out of a leased premises, these are both sort of dealt with by the fact that a lot of the time, the recommendations that are getting made, as I said, they're procedural based or they're behaviour change. So it's things like, is your lighting turned off when you're not in the room? Are your air conditioning systems at an optimised temperature and everything in between? So it's not always saying devote $30,000 to a really smick-smack solar PV system. You're looking at things that are really low or no cost to implement. Who's eligible? So we're not only working with business owners. That's a bit of a misconception, I think, in terms of who the program's tailored for. It's any community organisation, not-for-profit, sporting club in the state. So of course we do work with for-profit businesses, but in terms of who's taking up sort of the larger share of businesses and groups that we're working with, you do find it's sporting clubs, it's not-for-profits. We're working with Scouts groups, Lifeline, and all of those sorts of groups. So anyone in the room today, so long as you've got a fixed premises and you're not a house, we don't unfortunately work with residential customers, it's purely got to be sort of an actual organisational enterprise, but we'll work with you for sure. Why do we want to participate in a program like this? Far and away, the biggest driver for a lot of businesses that we work with is the opportunity for cost savings. So if you think about the cost burden of electricity, water and waste in terms of your business's operations, depending on the size, we work with businesses who are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year across those metrics. But even if you're spending $5,000 a year on electricity, what could an extra $1,000 or $2,000 do for your business, and where could you reinvest that money is a really big driver for us. Becoming a more resilient organisation, so again, helping you to become a little bit more lean during times that are not ideal. Obviously, COVID brought to the forefront times where if you've got heavy overheads, that's a really difficult thing to navigate through. But if you're sort of becoming as lean as you can in terms of your overheads and your cost burden, then that's a big driver. And then importantly, I guess, to align with aligning your operations with community expectations. So increasingly, even for something as simple as sort of a soccer club, you're seeing people having a growing expectation that you're going to be taking sustainability seriously, that you're going to be looking at these sorts of things and sort of playing an active role in terms of reducing your own footprint. Yeah.
Is this program available for schools and early learning centres?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we work with a lot of kindergartens, schools, soccer clubs, you name it, basically anyone who's got a fixed premises. That's obviously within Queensland, we'll work with. Yeah. I'm just going to go on to some of the trends we see in the program. So this is some of the learnings we've sort of come out with over the last 8 years. Again, when I talked about if you had to profile the most typical business or group that we work with, it's sporting clubs, far and away. Soccer clubs, shooting clubs, rowing clubs, whoever it might be. I think a lot of what's driving that is the fact that some of these sites are relatively large in that their resource use is relatively considerable. And you've got people that are really strapped for time. And so people who are really busy in the day-to-day running of their clubs don't have a lot of time to devote to these sorts of programs and these sorts of initiatives. And so that's, by virtue of that, they form a really core part of the constituency that we work with. But as you can see, we'll work through and with businesses across any industry. The process is really conducive to any business that's in the state or any group that's in the state. So that's really exciting. In terms of regions where we're working with, again, we do see a bit of skew here to Southeast Queensland, although Cairns also we see a really big uptake. This is just in the last couple of years, these numbers, but the trends sort of hold true across the entire 8 years that we've worked. But again, we'll work across every region. So obviously we'll work with anyone down here in the Moreton Bay region or surrounding areas. Some of that surveying that we've done through CCRQ in terms of what's costing businesses and what's a really big impact on businesses' bottom line. Energy consistently ranks as a really principal cost for a lot of businesses. And again, when you look at water infrastructure and costs and the reintroduction of our waste levy in 2019, waste also forms or can form a really large cost burden for a lot of groups. Businesses, this is just from our last year's program results. So businesses that stay involved in the program for about 12 months, so go through with a coaching session and look to implement some of the recommendations in their coaching report. On average, we're finding they're saving about 27% off their energy costs, which is really exciting. Again, for a business that's paying $10,000 a year on electricity, that's almost $2,500 or slightly over. So it can amount to some quite considerable cost savings. When we're looking at waste costs, again, with the reintroduction of the waste levy, costs have gone up considerably in a lot of different areas. So for businesses just from last year that are working with our program over a 12-month basis, you're looking at about a 23% reduction in your waste costs. So that can be really exciting as well. We have gone through the process of developing some industry insights reports. So these are all available on our website, but it's just to say that obviously, if you consider, well, what does a typical business in Queensland look like? It's incredibly diverse, and the sorts of challenges and opportunities that are available for each of those different industries is quite diverse accordingly. So we've gone through and developed different industry insights reports for different industries. So you can see there, we've got a package there for accommodation businesses, manufacturing, warehousing. And if you look at the bottom right there, we've got a tailored report there for sporting facilities. So going through some of the sort of pervasive challenges that businesses are finding in that industry concerning sustainability and managing their resource use, as well as what sort of recommendations are we consistently providing to those sorts of businesses. So if you didn't want to go through with a 2-hour coaching session, or if you wanted to have a bit of a heads up or a head start prior to meeting with one of our coaches, these industry insights reports can be really valuable for those sorts of groups. Again, in terms of what's in there, you're looking at savings opportunities, discussing some of the major trends that we're seeing, common recommendations, and importantly, case studies, which we'll go through a couple later in this, but we've got a couple of case studies there to help you kind of ground in terms of, all right, well, I can see other businesses here that I know of actually stepping through these sorts of things. So it lowers that level of reluctancy, I guess, for businesses who are concerned that this might be, out of their reach or a little bit too challenging to get involved with. We've got some case studies to help sort of assuage those fears. One of the case studies we worked with, so Grange Thistle Soccer Club. So we've worked with them for a couple of years now. And over the 2 years that they've been involved in our program, what we see for them is a 37% reduction in energy intensity and a 45% reduction in waste intensity. So that's looking at the amount of energy consumed per player in the club and the amount of waste or the volume of waste that's sent to landfill per player in the club. So those are some pretty considerable and great results. In terms of what they're doing a lot of different things, and these are the sorts of initiatives that our coaches were flagging with these guys about 2 years ago to say, if you've got some sort of objectives to look at your sustainability and managing your resource use, let's have a look at these sorts of recommendations. So these guys have installed solar, they've upgraded some of their field lighting, They've made sure it's sort of energy efficient alternatives. They're rarely using the air conditioning system, so that's something our coaches were able to discuss with them to say, look, on really hot days, this is going to be important, but in other days of the year and days where there's a nice breeze, there's a lot of energy wasted by having that running non-stop and at a really cool temperature. So let's see if we can tweak that and sort of modify your staff behaviours to run that a little bit less frequently. And with some of the revamps they've done, they've actually only now got cold water available just for the hand basins in the change rooms. Again, heating water can be a considerable energy user in that site. So just some simple tweaks like that, and we see some quite great results. In terms of their waste and water there, you can have a read about some of the things they've done. These slides will be circulated after you sort of leave here today. So if you want to have a bit of a more of an in-depth look about what these guys are doing, by all means. But again, just helping to sort of understand that we do have clubs like this working with our program, and they've been able to achieve some great results. Hockey Queensland, another case study that and a business that we've worked with. So for them, again, since 2017, so a few more years, but we've seen some really substantial results over those years. So every year they're sort of demonstrating incremental reductions in their resource use. And they've done a fantastic job and have been able to sort of achieve some terrific results there. Energy use, again, they were able to, we sort of helped develop a grant for these guys, or an application, sorry, to apply for a Brisbane City Council community grant, which they ultimately used to sort of upgrade some of their equipment and LED lighting, which was a really big driver behind this. So in terms of accessing grants and other sort of sources of funding, our coaches can help with that. They can help sort of point you in the right direction. And one thing to touch on, I think, is the fact that this program is really designed for businesses who are sort of taking those first steps in terms of their sustainability and in terms of what they're trying to achieve. So there's no judgment, and there's really no, there's not going to be any, judgment, I guess you'd say, in terms of the businesses that we're working with. It's genuinely, we're going to sort of tailor our advice to whatever stage you're at, and we're going to have a listen to what your objectives are in this sort of space, and we're going to tailor our messaging accordingly. So yeah, Hockey Queensland, another great example. How we can save money through sustainability. Again, these are some high level recommendations, and I'd like, as much as I'd like to pretend that I'm a technical expert in this space, I'm not. I'm a technical expert in helping to deliver the program. But if we go back to some of those consultants who are going to be going out to your premises, they are technical and subject matter experts in this space. But just to touch on some of the high level recommendations that we're consistently providing to different businesses across energy, water, waste, and behaviour change. For energy, a really simple one is just adjusting your air conditioning settings to sort of be optimum for your region and sort of as close to ambient temperature as possible. Investigating solar PV and other energy providers to secure a better deal. Often that's something that groups won't go through the process of doing in terms of evaluating whether they're on the best deal that's available. So that can be a really no cost and takes a bit of time, but once you've done it, there's the opportunity to save hundreds of dollars a year, potentially. Lighting's are really big, particularly in older buildings. So obviously this is quite a new building, I assume. But if you're working with any older type facilities and buildings, lighting's a really big opportunity in terms of quick wins. It's not too expensive in terms of retrofitting some of that older lighting out. And the payback period can be as little as 6 months to 1.5 years to start sort of getting some money back in terms of that. So new buildings like this will often be built with energy efficiency in mind. As energy's become more expensive and as it's sort of increasingly in the public sort of sphere. But when you're working with older buildings where you've got old infrastructure, often they can be just a bit of a sink. Our company used to work at a building that was about 60 years old, and it was incredibly inefficient. Not to say that you can't retrofit it and you can't do some things to sort of make it a little bit better. But look, all to say, energy can be a really big opportunity for many businesses. On there on the right is really important. Monitoring for water leaks, and our consultants can sort of help you set up to look at how you do that and putting a system in place to even once a month, just making sure that you've got nothing, that's sort of out of sorts. We had a business that didn't know they had a leak until they actually forwarded us some of their billing information before they accessed their coaching session. Their water bills were typically about $3,000 a quarter. Their most recent though was $38,000 for a quarter. They just pay the bill. They didn't sort of double check that, or they didn't look at like, oh, that's strange. We sort of flagged that with them to say, look, your consumption skyrocketed in this period. Did something happen here? Did you have an event? And they said, no, not to the best of our knowledge. when our consultant got out there, they had an enormous water leak that was filling into one of the back paddocks. So for sporting clubs that have, or showgrounds, whatever it might be, wherever you've got a large area of land that needs to be irrigated with water, you've got a pretty high, well, not a high probability, but there's the possibility of water leaks. And if they are to happen, it can be catastrophic in terms of your cost. We look at some of the businesses we work with, and $38,000 out of that for a quarter, they can't pay that. So that can be really crippling to your business. But again, just going through the process of looking at what sort of fixtures and what sort of your area of operation looks like. Water efficient fixtures, when you're looking at taps and toilets, urinals, whatever it might be, that can be a really key opportunity for you to help sort of save across your water consumption as well. Waste, again, this is as was alluded to in the previous session, it's a whole nother ball game. Waste can be an incredibly challenging issue to sort of wrap your head around, especially when you're looking at commercial quantities of waste beyond sort of residential. The consultants can go through and have a pretty good idea, similar to what you're talking about there, just kind of sifting through some of the waste you have and identifying where you can start to divert some of that waste or how you can avoid it in the first place. But just some of the really, if you had to sort of profile the most common waste streams that we're working with, e-waste for a lot of groups is really, really prominent. Soft plastics is pervasive and everywhere, so that's a really common one. But even the opportunity to sort of work with your suppliers and look at if you're shipping in, canteen food, sporting goods, jerseys, whatever that might be, just having a conversation with the suppliers to say, when you send that to me, I use whatever the good is, but I'm left with all the packaging that I don't necessarily want to do, A, from a cost standpoint, because I'm having to pay for that to be collected, but also from an environmental standpoint, I don't want mountains of waste that I'm dealing with on a recurring basis. So working with your suppliers concerning their packaging options can be a really sort of fruitful opportunity. And then in terms of changing behaviours, again, you've got to bring your staff along for the ride. And the best results we see in organisations where, if not everyone in your organisation, you might have a bit of a green team that's working. And if you're believing in sort of the high level mission of we want to cut costs and we want to sort of do what's right from an environmental perspective, you can have some terrific outcomes. So bringing your staff along for the ride, making sure everyone understands why you're sort of going through this exercise and what sort of benefits you're hoping to achieve, that can be an incredibly valuable opportunity as well. As I said, I'll be floating around here for a little bit afterwards. We do have some business cards and some QR codes if you want to sort of jump to that registration page. Again, it's very low commitment in terms of you're not going to pay anything at any stage. Once you're prepared with that coaching report, we'll provide as much follow-up as you'd like in terms of support to actually implement some of those recommendations. But if you have a look at some of the recommendations there and some of them don't seem realistic to you, or you don't have the capacity at the moment to look at them, there's no obligation to be doing that. So in terms of accessibility to the program, it is really low confrontational. There's not going to be any judgment at any stage. It's really set up here and designed to sort of work with you and achieve whatever outcomes you're sort of striving for. So we'd encourage everyone to sort of get on board and give it a go, see for yourself. Thanks, so guys. Look, any questions at this point about maybe eligibility, how the program's going to run, anything like that?
I've got a bit of a question.
Yeah.
If, like, we're sort of hoping to look at improving solar lighting and that's around our areas.
Yep.
That is something that we could actually give us some feedback on that, and we're looking at what grant to that.
Yep.
Is that something also that you can put in direction?
Yeah, definitely. So as I said, access to funding is a really big barrier in terms of looking at some of these initiatives. So while the program is designed for businesses that are sort of starting out on their sustainability journey and across sort of energy, water and waste, if you're coming in with a specific query to say, look, I already have a pretty good understanding of what I want to do, I just need some sort of support to help me get there, that's completely fine. We do have that pre-coaching questionnaire where it's a bit of a free text option just to sort of describe what are you trying to get out of the program. So that would be an opportunity where you can quite clearly say, look, here's where we are, and this is specifically what I want to look at. And all it'd mean is when the consultant's out on site with you, they're going to work with you exclusively on that, if that's your wish. So instead of sort of wandering through your site and saying, oh, well, here's where your other recommendations might be, which they can certainly do, it might just be the case that they devote, let's say, 75% of the time to putting you in touch with whatever grants might be available or other funding might be accessible to you. So yeah, certainly that's feasible. Yep.
Actually, I think my question is more to Sport and Rec, to Queensland Government, particularly in relation to the funding question. I was fortunate in being involved with a tennis club a few years ago where the council and the state government asked us what it is that we might want with our tennis centre. So we had quite a few sustainability oriented people there. So we mapped out very precisely what it is that we would want to have, including the solars, including all the toilet waste stuff being converted into usable water, even sort of a whole lot of different coating on some of the plastics and what have you. So we were lucky in a sense in that we a bit of a master print for that. But somebody who doesn't know about that, but runs a club now that wants to be revamped, does the government actually have a policy on making sure that any of those sort of revamps are done according to the sort of guidelines that you're talking about?
I'll answer that one. I think it's mainly if you're working with council to deliver a revamp or a new facility, it's our project managers would definitely be across that sort of stuff in terms of what is required in standards. But yeah, I'm sure they're usually across that sort of thing. So does that sort of answer that one?
Yeah, it's just more.
I don't really have any.
A matter of course. At the time, we were lucky. We had some really good people that we were working with. I said, yeah, it's a good idea. Why not? And, we had 20 odd kilowatts of stuff on our roof, which was, somebody got up there at 1 o'clock one morning and nicked half of them. But, got those back eventually. But so, yeah, so I just wondering whether it's gone from being a special sort of event to being normal practice, really. Sounds like
it's as far as I'm aware, it is. If you look at this facility here, there's lots of things that they've implemented that are definitely normal practice, and it's not even. I'm not talking about the environment now as well, but it's things like disability access as well. Yeah. Like that's starting to become even more normal practice, which is really needed. So it's good to see that stuff happening. So
I know the Brisbane City Council periodically offers sustainability grants for not-for-profit groups. So you're principally looking at sporting clubs and things like that there. Its values up to $10,000. It has been, and I think continues to be, a requirement that you have an energy auditor or come out to your site pre-applying to make sure that it's sort of feasible and commercially viable. Or you can engage an Ecobiz coach to come and do the same, which again is completely free. So that's quite attractive to a lot of businesses rather than paying for an energy auditor to come out. We worked with a business not too long ago, several months ago, where they were applying for such grant and they said, yeah, look, we want to cover our entire club. It was a cricket club. We want to cover our entire roof with solar. We want to be, like cutting edge and all that. The system itself was going to cost, I think, $70,000. And they were seeking some sort of co-investment from the Brisbane City Council. When we got out there, they have 2 fields, all of their high bay lighting, which are incredibly energy intensive. They were running 24/7, as it turned out. So they were running all through the day, even when people aren't there. The coach sort of asked the question, well, hang on, before we think about solar, let's look at this before you go and spend $70,000, which would be amazing, I'm sure. But let's look at the rest of your club. When we got out there, yeah, they were running 24/7, middle of the day, even when games aren't being played, whatever it might be. So asked the question, are these on a timer? No, I don't think it comes with a timer. He flicked around the back. He helped them call a contractor who sort of maintains those systems. They were out in 30 minutes to basically put in the timers to set that up to only be running on game nights and actually only at night. So the projections for what they're looking to save there are well into the thousands of dollars just by that simple change, having a sort of second set of eyes to come out and have a look at what you've got set up. So it's outcomes like that. We've had other warehouses that we work with where the shelving, the warehouse has skylights, horizontally down the site. All their shelving was set up perpendicular to those skylights. And so that had to put in massive LED lights to sort of illuminate the warehouse. And I said, well, okay, this is going to take some time and effort, but you really just need to rejig that. And then you turn all your lights off because you've got skylights. So things like that, just having a second set of eyes to come in. And again, the fact that it's a free program, you don't have much to lose. So yeah, it can be really, really fantastic and drive a lot of really good outcomes.
So do we take the QR code now?
Yeah, welcome to. I've got some actual documents that you can take out. Otherwise, you can navigate to our website. If you just type in Ecobiz, so that's Ecobiz. There's not that many other Ecobizzes out there, so you'll find our website. But again, it's delivered by CCRQ. So if you're wondering about the sort of relation, so it's delivered by the State Chamber of Commerce. We ourselves are a not-for-profit. We support and advocate for SMEs across Queensland. But the fact that it's free is because it's subsidised and paid for by the state government. So completely free for you to access, but not actually delivered by government at this stage.
Do you share the information collected from individuals?
No, so the only time we would share anything like this, we would only do that with written consent from the business to say, hey, you had a really good story. Would you mind if we sort of held that up as a bit of a shining example, as a case study? And only if they're happy to do that would we share this. Any other businesses we work with, it's completely de-identified. We don't share your specific data back with government or anything like that. It's purely for our own records. And the rationale for capturing your billing data is purely just so we can report back to you at some stage to say, well, here's how much you were consuming, here's how much energy, for instance, you're consuming before you came to us. 12 months down the line, let's have a look at what you're using now. That's actually a pretty phenomenal saving. But that information is not shared with anyone externally without the business owner's written approval. So.
That's hard to convince. I mean, a
Yeah.
non-profit organisation with the majority of the members are over 70,
Yep.
80.
Yep.
And if I was to, like, this is terrific for me, I'm happy to share whatever, but the electricity bills and water bills, all of those things, I know that they would roll over because they wouldn't like that information shared. Yeah, and I know come over that. CCRQ does have a privacy policy if they're looking for some sort of assurance to basically outline the fact that, look, this is not shared. Like, you can screenshot it, you can take that to the court to say we're not going to share this data with anyone. Look, in a situation like that, there's the possibility of foregoing some of that data capture. So if it's preferred, we could have the consultant meet you out on site, and so long as the consultant can eyeball some of your data on site, because it's important for our records to be able to make that sort of before and after assessment. The other reason it's important is because the consultant has a lot of expertise concerning looking at your tariff, looking at some of the other information in your bill to have a look at, are you on the best contract, getting a feel for how your electricity is charged, what sort of waste provider you're with, and how is that billed. So for waste on a commercial scale, for a commercial service offering through Remondis or JJ Richards, for instance, often it's charged by, just per pickup. And so looking at that cost structure and exactly how you're billed helps the coach make recommendations regarding your waste that are actually also going to drive cost saving for you as well. So it's great to sort of, so recommendations like, if you've got a giant bin that is only 20% full, let's go back to your contractor and only get it picked up once a month or once a fortnight, or let's get a smaller bin for you. And that's the only way it's going to actually have a direct cost saving for your business. So information like that is why the consultants often want to have a look at those utility bills, because there's a lot of information in there. But we can have a chat. If it's something they're not going to be comfortable for doing, we could look at foregoing that in that instance. Yep.
Here's a story for you. There's a bridge club over on the north side of Brisbane, and my neighbours said, oh, he worked in solar power.
Yeah.
He said, you've got a lot of solar panels, you must be making money. And he said, no, we've got a big electricity bill. I said, well, show me, that's not right. And they got an electrician to come out. Yeah, that's right. The neighbour said, it's not right, get another electrician. Half the solar panels hadn't been working for years, so there wasn't a before and after. But these people didn't know that was too much, considering the number of solar panels they had.
We had a school up in Townsville, private school, that we were working with, and the only time that actually dug out their utility, they were just paying them as they come in. Like, electricity, yep, we'll pay that. Without, because again, they're busy, right? If you're working in accounts, you're processing invoices. That's just sort of second nature. It was only when they sort of provided their last 12 months of electricity bills to us that we sort of worked out they had an enormous solar system. About 80% of them had been completely broken beyond repair in a cyclone 7 years ago. They hadn't been working for 7 years. So they'd spent, and I think of the cost of panels 7 years ago, I think it cost them over $100,000 to put that in place. The vast majority hadn't been working for 7 years. And the only way they found that is because we had a look at your bills and thought, geez, these bills look pretty high, because they told us, look, oh yeah, here's some photos, from when they were installed. We've got a lot of solar on the roof. We're excited to hear about what else we might be able to do. And it was only when we looked at those bills and thought, gee, that's really high for a school that's not that big and has, I think it was, upwards of about 60 kilowatts worth of solar on the roof. Sure enough, the coach got there, got up on the roof safely, and just looked, they're all sort of smashed to pieces, cables lying everywhere. So, things like that. It can be really valuable to have someone, second set of eyes to come in, just have a once over your business, and some things that you might just have never thought about, like leaving your high bay lights on all the time, putting your warehouse completely opposite to your skylights and your solar system's not working, things like that. Have a bit of a once over and see if there's anything you can do.
The other thing, so we're
in showgrounds,
Yeah.
so we're in leased property.
Yeah.
And we're actually recognised as a landing site for the helicopter that comes in for the local hospital.
Yep.
Now, the lights that we have to turn on in the and generally it's only ever in the middle of the night the helicopters have to arrive, so we've got to turn all those lights on. What's the general consensus on that sort of thing? I suppose it's more for you, Linton, with getting those changed over to more energy efficient lighting and that sort of thing. For like, is that council's responsibility? Is that our responsibility? Like, what's the go there? And yeah.
So definitely, if you're looking at the lighting, in terms of responsibility, it'd mainly be you guys looking to upgrade. But improvement works application from council would have to be looked at as well, and then we'll our stakeholders would comment on that for approval. So yeah, I hope that sort of.
So is that lighting needing to be turned on every night, or just when there's a helicopter?
So it's not when there are events being facilitated in our main ring area that we actually need to have those on. So they're not on every night of the week. They're only we're very, very conscientious of that because we've put solar panels in on our roof to cut down our costs there.
Yep.
But I believe there were a number of lights that actually have stopped working. And so we needed to look at ways that we can update that. And a recent visit by one of the council's people that came in to change one of those lights because they're up massively high. We have to get a cherry picker in to, do that sort of stuff. He actually suggested that he would, look at putting in an improvement works thing for changing those lights over to a more energy efficient light.
Yeah.
And like when you said, so if we want to do something like that, so for example, we're talking about solar lights in our camping area, we do is improvements work request.
Yep.
And does that then maybe the council will look at sort of subsidising that in some way if we request that?
There is the community infrastructure grant that's around. So if you're going for an upgrade, so you couldn't just replace a light for like. Like we'd want to see evidence of it being an actual upgrade, and then that sort of thing is funded through that grant. Okay, so. If you need any information like that, I can send it through, or your sport and rec officer can definitely send that through. So,
and it can even be as simple as, if you want some help writing that grant, or, sometimes for some of these grants, there needs to be a clear business case to say, well, what are the sort of specifics here? And so obviously the high level is we want to put a more energy efficient light in there. But if you want some assistance, having someone out to kind of help beef that up with a bit, maybe some cost projections and sort of expected energy savings with that, that's some of our consultants can sort of help you to do. Just put a sort of some more meat on the bone in terms of that grant.
What we're looking at doing is we want to make sure that we're running efficiently with what we have.
Yeah.
But we're also wanting to improve the safety and security of not only just the patrons that use our facilities, but also our camping patrons by putting in, because there's very little lighting in our camping area whatsoever. Well, actually, there's moonlight. And we
actually haven't got the toilets going all night. So it's interesting that
well, our toilets do have they're only turned on of a night time, but nonetheless it's just wanting getting that help with, and this is something that we'd like to do, and we've been talking about it for about 6 months now, and we've just got the quote from the electrician to give us that that costing to look at doing this. So for our camping area, but looking at what we can do and how we can get assistance, and that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Ruby, looking at
and
that.
like your other considerations about safety, and there's a whole lot of other things you're going to take into account. So the consultants that are working with you are very cognizant of that. And so it's not, environmental savings at the cost of everything else. It's got to make sense for your business. And obviously you've got other considerations to work with there, but that is really their expertise in terms of, we're wanting to achieve some cost savings and some environmental benefits within the broader scope of you needing to run a business and you needing to look after your business running day to day. So it'd be great to say, look, just don't ever turn any lights on and turn all your fridges off and don't run the aircon. It's not realistic. It's got to be sort of realistic to your situation. So, yeah.
Just probably just an idea. Or the thing is that just in terms of thinking about the lighting and the cost of lighting, and then the cost of solar panels, etc. I was involved with a bulk buy on solar panels some years ago, and we got a reduction of about 75% on those costs. Now the costs overall of those things have gone down. I just wonder, how many sporting or community organisations in this region are independently of each other thinking about whether or not they'd like some solar panels, and that if there's some sort of collective effort there. I think you can do really pretty well with that, not just for lighting for sporting fields and so on, but the use of electric vehicles is going to upgrade over the next few years enormously. Imagine what it would be like with having EV connections over here at Ace Sports. Drop in there, plug your car in for an hour, watch your sport, drive away.
And that model could be with a variety of different things.
You could even charge for some of that if, whatever, I'm just thinking. Maybe a coordinated effort there on that. I know people have got lots of other things to do, but that would seem to be one thing that might be pretty useful at the moment.
Yeah, that sounds good. And that model could be applied to rainwater tanks, waste compactors, EV charging stations, whatever it might be. You aggregate that demand, and all of a sudden,
There was a major article on one of the current affair programs just the other night. So there are communities around Australia doing that as communities. I'm thinking here more of communities of interest, which is sporting community groups that have high level needs for power consumption, basically, just to run their own business.
It's a good idea, definitely. Just while I remember as well, sorry, Tim, if you wanted to go for your solar panels and that sort of thing, with that improvement works application, it's very important that you do submit that as soon as you can. I've had groups I've worked with in the past where they've got the grant for the solar, and sort of the council didn't really know about it, and then they've applied for that improvement works application, and then unfortunately the roof wasn't up to standard, so then council had to sort of do what we could to get the roof up to standard. But there was an instance where unfortunately they had to change their plans and things. So it's important that try and keep council in the picture as much as you can in terms of those sorts of things like solar panels. Yeah.
All right. Well, look, that's really all I had for today, guys. I've got some business cards if anyone's interested to have that. But of course, we'd welcome anyone to sort of navigate through to the website. Just ask for a couple of quick details to register your interest, and then we'll be in touch to kind of step you through what happens from there. But yeah, thanks, guys. Cheers.